again, it's Wayne Cameron, continuing my series on my YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about musical interpretation. Now, this can be a very touchy subject. Interpretation. You have a piece, whether you're playing it or conducting it, you have to interpret what you think the music is about. Okay? Now we have what I call purists that dictate specifically if it says a certain tempo marking, they try to do that. If there's any kind of markings in it, they try to stick religiously to those markings, which is fine. But if you listen to any of the great conductors conduct the same piece, you'll hear all kind of differences in tempo, in mood, in color. The list can go on, okay? I'll give you a perfect example that I'll probably get a lot of negative comments about. If you've ever heard Aaron Copland and Igor Stravinsky conduct their own pieces, if that's the way they were interpreted by everyone, in my opinion, they would have never been famous. The way they conduct their own pieces, quite frankly, is boring. Then you give Rite of Spring to Leonard Bernstein, and all of a sudden, fireworks, skyrockets. He interprets it and brings it to life. Same thing with Aaron Copland. His pieces, wonderful pieces, when he conducts them, they're very bland. You give it to Abato, some other famous conductor, all of a sudden you can see the cowboys out on the prairie. There's no question about it. If you do and compare that, hopefully you'll come to the same conclusion I do. Another example, I've conducted Howard Hanson's Second Symphony many times. It's called the Romantic Symphony. Well, I hardly followed any of his instructions as far as tempo and crescendo and all that kind of stuff, because it didn't make any sense. Then, years later, after I'd conducted it 3 or 4 times, I heard him conducted it with the Eastman School of Music Orchestra. And he didn't even do what he did, what he wrote in the symphony. He was doing stuff I was doing. So even Howard Hanson conducted his own piece, didn't even do what he wrote in his own symphony. I mean, he did all kind of interpretive things, different tempos, retards, cello rondos, crescendos or decrescendos, but none of that was written in. But the music implied and dictated that something had to happen there. So I was very gratified to hear that. When I was younger, I used to judge the Maryland, Virginia, around DC area solo festivals. Well, there's always a thing in there about interpretation. And quite frankly, I used to write none. There was no interpretation. They'd play a piece, and it was played like a machine. There was no musical thought given to it. Now, I didn't blame the student. I didn't grade them down for that because I didn't teach them the piece. But every once in a while, you get a kid come in there, and they'd play a piece that's very popular, and he'd be doing some subtle musical things, and I was overjoyed to hear that. I mean, I raved over those kind of kids because they were really thinking musically. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I encourage my students, for instance, I'll give them, say, a characteristic study out of the Arbor book, number 9 out of the Arbor book. And I say, come back with a musical interpretation of that. If you can make that musical, then you make anything musical. I said, you can do anything to it but change the notes. You can change the articulation, you can change the dynamics, you can use rubato, you can do anything you want to make it musical. And some people come in with very interesting things. I've even had students, especially one girl one time, I gave her a very, very famous piece that people play all the time. And she came in with an interpretation that I would have never thought of, and I thought it was beautiful. And ever since then, when I teach it, I teach her interpretation of my own students. I mean, it was very refreshing. The girl was really thinking. It was really fun to work with somebody like that. A good example that I use to help teach interpretation is Charlier Etude Number 2. Very famous etude. Anybody who's anybody in the trumpet world knows what it sounds like. In my opinion, there aren't any two beats in it at the same speed hardly. Now there are all kind of great players on YouTube who play it. And I've only seen about one or two that do anything to it except play the notes. I mean, they do little things here and there, but it's so full of things that could be done incredibly musical. Like if a string player played certain parts of that, they wouldn't play it the way a trumpet player plays it. They would take more time here, maybe less time there to make it really expressive. I plan to do a lesson on Charlier Number 2 at some point. I have a very advanced student who just went off to major music. When he comes home in the summer, I'm going to try to do a video with him, have him play it straight, and then he already knows the way I like to hear it, but I'm going to show him so people can see what we did to it. I'm going to teach it and let you see what can be done to it. But anyway, I want to encourage you that when you play, try to look past just the notes. Just the notes. I'll give you a perfect example. There's a composer, I don't know if he's still alive or not, his name's Alex Wilder, New York. He wrote a bass trombone sonata. I think it was a sonata. This was years ago. And some guy made a recording of it. And in the review that was written of it, written by the bass trombone player of the Boston Symphony, he ripped the guy apart because he didn't play it as written. Well, I just happened to read the next edition of the periodical that it was in, and Wilder wrote in and raked this guy who reviewed it over the coals, saying that he loved what the guy did to his piece. He said, I'm paraphrasing, he said basically, he writes the piece, the musician puts the music in it, which I thought that's very refreshing. The guy brought his musical experience and his musicianship to this piece and interpreted it in a way that even the composer liked what he did to it. So I thought that was a remarkable comment. So I want to encourage you, look past the notes. Don't be afraid to try something. If it doesn't work, do something else. But always look for the music beyond the notes. See you later, guys. It's always a pleasure.